Welcome everyone, Joe with ECRM at our on and off premise adult beverage session here in Vegas. And with me is Kaleigh Theriault with NIQ, who presented on trends in the on and off premise bev al industry. So today we're going to talk about RTDs, which seem to be everywhere these days. And so to get started, give us a quick overview of what's happening in the RTD space, because there was so much happening in your presentation.
Yeah, those three little letters are probably one of the most popular topics that we've been talking about for the past several years. And here at NIQ, we capture everything in our RTD definition, anything from hard seltzers to flavored malt beverages, those spirits cocktails, and then wine-based cocktails as well. So this entire category has really exploded over the past 5 years. In being at home during the pandemic really aided to the growth of it in the off-premise. And we saw something like hard seltzers really take off, but those have sort of approached their maturity levels and they're starting to decline now. And we're seeing more growth now coming from spirits-based cocktails. So if you're anything like me, you're not a mixologist at home. And so these canned cocktails really allow that really nice drinking experience of a cocktail that you might get in the on-premise without having to, get all the ingredients together and mix it up and not have it taste like what you would like. So yeah, canned cocktails definitely have that convenience factor to them.
Are on-premise people, are they using it as mixers too?
Yeah, so the on-premise is a little bit unique in that something like hard seltzers was unique, I guess we could say. And they originally launched off-premise and then started to make their way on-premise. But if we think about trends historically, they tend to start in the on-premise and then make their way to the off-premise. And this was sort of a reversal of that. Yeah. But some of the top canned cocktails are, of course, cocktails that come from the on-premise. So it's kind of like the chicken or the egg thing, I think, that we talk about with that. But with bars and restaurants, they have a unique, sort of play when it comes to the RTD world and canned cocktails. It never would have been a thing 5 years ago, probably. Yeah. And now post-pandemic, and we're back into this new normal, they've definitely become popular among venues where you're looking to make some drinks a little bit faster and serve customers at a quicker rate. Yeah. And maybe you don't want the bartender spending all of that time mixing a cocktail.
Well, that convenience part definitely makes a difference, because I saw, obviously, during the pandemic, it was so much easier for restaurants to just serve those. And there's less touching. You don't have a person that's messing around with things, breathing on it. You just get a bucket.
A lot safer.
But then what I'm seeing, and during that point is when you have like white tablecloth restaurants that never would have dreamed of RTDs started actually using them. But now what I'm seeing is, especially, it's the convenience of ordering. Like if you have a group of people, I see it in the sports bars by me especially. It's so much easier to just, okay, for a bucket of 4 high noons for X amount, or a bucket of, this Truly or whatever. It's so much easier, and you're seeing a lot more of the RTDs being served to groups in a bucket like that.
Definitely. It's a much easier serve, not having to pour a bunch of drinks and put more of that energy into it, or effort, I guess, from an on-premise perspective. So in some ways it saves a little bit from an operational cost perspective, and then they can focus on the bartender truly mixing up some really cool cocktails, I'm sure, rather than focusing on mixing, basic vodka soda and spending that time.
Now, you mentioned, it's almost saturated now. There's so many brands that are, and you also have regular brands, like you have Ocean Spray and Dunkin' and there was a few that you mentioned that are trying to get in on the game. What's happening there?
Yeah, there's a ton of blurring, I think. We all know it. And if you walk into the convenience store or the liquor store to make a purchase of RTDs, there's probably something new every time you go into that store, which from a consumer standpoint is really exciting, because there's this endless amount of, trial that you can do. But some brands that have come from that traditional beverage world have found some success, and they're continuing to not only get trial from consumers, but also repeat. So that's a good measure that we take a look at to understand if they're sustainable innovations. But on the flip side of it, some brands haven't resonated completely. They do initially, and consumers like to try them, but then the flavor doesn't really hit home for consumers, or they don't necessarily enjoy drinking the entire experience. So that's another thing that's happening, is there's an endless amount of flavors, and so we don't know if consumers are going to get to a flavor fatigue place either in their drinking.
Well, I know what really works well, especially with off-premise, is just, the case of mixed flavors, right? Because you can't go, a lot more people are entertaining at home these days, and you just can't go wrong if you have like 6 different flavors in a case. It's like, okay, here, pick what you want.
Exactly, and then you have something that suits everybody without having to put in that extra time or effort, because we're all time starved. We all have a lot going on. There's a lot of things that we need to do throughout the day, and adding flavors to different cocktails or making those drinks at home for our friends isn't necessarily something we want to spend our time doing. We want to enjoy the occasion with drinking with others. So.
Especially if they're pre-gaming. So they get together beforehand. It's like, do something quick, then you go out and get the mixed drinks.
Yeah, and if you're anything like me, drinking a single flavor throughout an entire occasion gets kind of boring. So those variety packs really allow for that. Mixing up of flavors throughout the drinking occasion and keeping it light and fresh, I guess, for each drink.
Excellent. Well, it'll be interesting to see how this keeps progressing over time.
Yeah, RTD is over 10% of the category now, total alcohol, and continuing to grow. So.
Well, you mentioned when you showed the lineup of like the top 10s, it's the tail end that keeps changing. Like the main ones stay the same, but it's at that 9th and 10th one where you see the new ones coming.
A lot of brand rotations happening there. And for some brands, they fall out of the top 10 because they hit home with the consumer initially, and then they don't continue to innovate and bring in new flavors or new cocktail types. And consumers are getting to the point where just another fruity flavor isn't going to fit permanently in their repertoire, and they're actually looking for some more interesting flavors. And we see a lot happening with flavor across total beverage alcohol, but kind of that hot and sweet and savory vibe kind of all mixed together is where we're seeing some new innovations happen.
Cool. Well, remember, keep posted with NIQ to stay up to date on what's going on with RTDs and all Bev Al. So, thanks again.
Thanks, Joe.